It's 2:03 p.m. and I will call this meeting of the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors to order and ask our clerk to call the roll, establish quorum, and read the statement and meeting procedures.
Okay, good afternoon. Supervisor Cerna.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Frost. Here. Hume.
Here.
And Desmond.
Here.
You have a quorum. This meeting of the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors is cablecast live on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel on the Comcast Consolidated Communications and AT&T Uverse cable systems. The meeting is closed caption and is webcast at metro14live.saccounty.gov. Today's meeting will be repeated Sunday, April 23rd at 6 p.m. on Channel 14. The Board of Supervisors fosters public engagement during the meeting and encourages public participation, civility, and use of courteous language. The Board does not condone the use of profanity, vulgar language, gestures, or other inappropriate behavior, including personal attacks or threats directed towards any meeting participant. Seating is limited and available on a first-come, first-served basis. Each speaker will be given 2 minutes to make a public comment and are limited to making one comment per agenda or off-agenda item. Please be mindful of the public comment procedures to avoid being interrupted or disconnected while making your comment. To make a comment in person, please fill out a speaker request form and hand it to clerk staff. The chairperson will open public comments for each agenda item or off-agenda matter and direct the clerk to call the name of each speaker. When the clerk calls your name, please come to the podium and make your comment. If a speaker is unavailable to make a comment prior to the closing of public comments, the speaker waives their request to speak, and the clerk will file the speaker request form in the record. The clerk will manage the timer and allow each speaker 2 minutes to make a comment. To make a comment by phone, dial 916-875-2500 and follow the prompts to be placed in queue for a specific agenda item or off-agenda matter. Clerk staff will transfer each caller into the meeting, and you may be on hold for an extended period of time, and your patience is appreciated. You may also send written comments by email to boardclerk@saccounty.gov, and your comments will be routed to the board and filed in the record. If you need an accommodation pursuant to the Americans with Disabilities Act or for medical or other reasons, please seek clerk staff for assistance or contact the clerk's office at 916-874-5451 or by email at boardclerk@saccounty.gov. Thank you in advance for your courtesy and understanding of the meeting procedures.
And thank you, Flo. I got a note that maybe the live streaming wasn't working. Can you check with, are we online?
I'm going to have, can you confirm? David, can you confirm? Okay, they're checking right now.
Okay. Well, I suppose we can just do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah.
So I'll ask Supervisor Hume, please lead us in the pledge.
Sure. Please address the flag, salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I just got a Skype that it's fine, it's working.
It is? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, thank you for being here for this afternoon session. Before we go to off-agenda comments, I'll just repeat what I said yesterday. We're changing things up a little bit with the off-agenda comments because we want to create some time for them at the beginning of the calendar, but we also need to make sure we have some certainty with respect to our time matters. So what I'm going to try doing from here on out is to do off agenda for 30 minutes at the beginning of the calendar, and if there are people signed up for off agenda beyond that 30 minutes, we will hold it till the end of the time matters. And so with that, I'll turn it over to you, Madam Clerk, for off agenda.
Okay, so first up is Dan Adderholt.
Well, it feels good to be back. I've been ill for a while. I had a medical problem. That's now I'm fine. But I'm also really appalled what's going on with my Mecca Homes crews. You guys promised my Mecca Homes crews they could stay on the Mecca Parkway as long as until homes are available for them and their pets. You guys promised my crews this. Now my crews are getting beaten down. I had videos of them getting beaten. My crew members are standing there protecting their rights. They are Americans. They deserve to be treated with respect. They're out there clean every day. You guys are responsible with this ordinance you guys passed. Is responsible for my homeless crews getting beat up because all they're trying to do is go by you guys' promise to them for them and their pets. And nice to know that the police and Sacramento police and the rangers are telling the homeless that they have to surrender the pets, then go in the shelter. And their pets are being put to sleep. I have proof of this, and I'm bringing it. You guys already know this. I'm bringing this court, and I'm really upset because I really didn't want to do this in a federal lawsuit because I happen to like Ann Edwards. I happen to like you guys very much, the Board of Supervisors. I just don't understand why you guys betrayed us like this, man. We're out here cleaning every day, and you guys are attacking my crew like they're criminals. You guys are criminalizing homelessness. You guys are literally entrapping and circling homeless people, and you guys are seriously attacking homeless pets. They have just as much rights as any one of you to be alive on this planet, and they're being put to sleep. And I don't want to hear the lies about Front Street not putting animals to sleep because they are. They're putting homeless pets to sleep at an alarming rate, and I can't believe you're allowing this. You, Rich Desmond, of all people, man, you came to me and told me that they're not going to do this to the homeless pets. They're doing it, man. They're criminalizing. You too, Cerna. You told me they're not going to let them do this, man. They're doing it. And my homeless crews are still, despite your guys' cruelty to them, are still out there every day cleaning up like they have been for the last 10 years. They're out there every day cleaning, despite they're being told to move, and their property are being destroyed every time they move somewhere. They're being chased around with little signs on their tent saying they can't be there. Now I found out from Commander Spencer
Mr.
that the
Adderholt,
Rangers...
you have about 4 seconds.
Huh?
You have about 4 seconds.
Well, now I found from Commander Spencer that you guys outlawed homeless being on America River Parkway, period. That is not what you guys promised us or told us. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Dorothy Richards.
Yes, I live on the American River Parkway, me and my husband and my pets. And I want to know why we were lied to, why we being harassed, why we're being beat up, why our pets are being euthanized, sir. And you know what? We clean up. I clean my place every day, and I know my neighbor does. I am tired of this group punishment thing because my neighbor is not clean. I've got to go, okay? I'm not responsible for what someone does, okay? And the Pledge of Allegiance that we all just stood here and said in this room is for all, not for some. And I'm really getting tired of being browbeaten by the cops, by the PD, by the Rangers, whoever comes out there. They disrespect us, treat us like garbage. I'm a human being. My husband's a human being. Everyone on that parkway is. Okay, I paid taxes in this country for 25 years. And you know what? I'm really getting sick and tired of being lied to by you people, okay? And I'm sorry. I'm just telling it like it is because I'm pissed off like Dan is. You know, we are disrespected, we are put down, we are shoved aside. Our animals are our children. I have 4 children. And I tell you right now, that they ever go to put one, no, that is my family. You lied about the pets. Front Street is killing animals every day. They kill over 300 and some animals in 1 week, sir. And you tell me if that ain't purposely done. Yes, that is. And I don't understand why we're all supposed to be equal in this room, no matter whether you have a roof or not, whether you have money in the bank or not. But we're not treated equal. And time again, when we exercise our rights, we are browbeaten, we are put down, we are wanted to put in jail. What's criminal about being homeless, sir? I'm not stealing from nobody. I'm not bothering nobody. I'm not taking from nobody. So you tell me what's criminal about activity? Nothing.
Okay, Ms. Richards, if you can wrap up, please.
And yes, I will. And I'm very angry and very mad. And you know what?
Ms.
Think
Richards,
about what you're doing here. Really
Ms.
think about
Richards, could you please
You
end your
want that to
comments?
you.
Thank you. Okay, so we have one more speaker. Mackenzie, I was calling. I have the paper. Yeah. There was a technical glitch, but we got you.
You're perfect. I'm sorry. I was like, wait, I saw it up there. Good afternoon, Board. My name is Mackenzie Wilson, and I'm a community organizer in Sacramento. I come today not just for the item on today's agenda, but also to bring to your attention the carnage occurring across your county, particularly right now on the American River Parkway. Rangers and Forensic Clean are out in full force enacting your policy of state violence, known as abatements, otherwise known as sweeps. People on the Parkway are living in a perpetual state of physical and psychological harm because our county has no services to provide, let alone housing or a place for them to go. I think we talked to you about this when you passed this critical infrastructure last year, and I hate to tell you, actually I love to tell you, I fucking told you so. You're sweeping them out with nowhere to go. And just one camp alone, like just one camp that I'm working with has been slated for a sweep over and over again, twice, like 2 or 3 times this week. Like how horrific is that? Like you do that to people. You're doing that to people with your policy. I also watched Rangers grab a man who was unhoused who said he had nowhere to go and then slammed his face into the ground until it was bloody. I'm like, this is your policy that you're allowing to continue. And this is, like I said, not an isolated incident, and things like this are ruining lives. I saw the natural resource plan that you all made, you know, the one with the American River Parkway Foundation, and how $36 million over the next 5 years is going to go into restoration, when in fact only like $29 million of it is just going to abatements and sweeps instead of housing. Shame, shame. I'll finish by naming that I went with some of you to the All In SAC event about the Homeless Action Plan, and what you missed after you left the room is a room full of over 100 orgs and service providers that applauded and cheered when it was named out loud that your homeless action plan is useless unless you end your policy of sweeps. So as a community organizer, I'm here to remind you of my role in this place, and I look forward to filling these chambers with all of Sacramento and getting them involved in forcing you to end your horrific, heinous, and violent policy of sweeps.
Thank you. Next, we have Keon.
County Board, I'm here to talk about your recent attempts to effectively thwart meaningful public discourse and participation within this body, considering the fact that you are trying to break up off-agenda comments that would bring important issues like the one Mackenzie just mentioned to your attention to 30 minutes in order, and then having the rest of the folks, all of whom have day jobs and are not paid 6-figure salaries to be doing this work, as you all are sitting on this board, to the end of the afternoon when or whenever you decide to finish up, knowing full well that most of those people are probably going to drop off. And I can't help but notice how you continuously seem to think that doing the same sort of public discussion rules as the city does, and which you just saw last night ended with the meeting getting closed down early because people were so outraged and upset because they were not heard, is somehow going to produce new, different results for you. It won't. In fact, this is like any discomfort you have felt during these off-agenda comments is nothing compared to what people have been experiencing for years from the city. But somehow this new board chair, who is in his first term, doesn't seem to understand that the reason people are showing up so upset and have no respect for the city's rules of decorum is because they know they're not being heard. They experience not being heard. And you attempting to continue the same pattern here at the county level is not going to make them be more quiet. It's not going to make your meetings more orderly at any point. It also doesn't inspire any measure of success or respect when you can't even do your own dirty work by shutting people down. You have to make your own city or your own county clerk, who knows better and actually has been doing a better job for years on end, do your dirty work for you. It's pretty cowardly, but you know, I don't expect much better.
Keon, could you
Your time
wrap
is
up your
up. Thank
comments?
you.
Oh,
Thank
now
you.
speak up. Good job.
Okay, so that concludes your public comments, and we don't have anyone on the phone, so
Okay.
I'm going to close that now.
Close the off agenda, and we'll move to our one-timed matter of the day, item 2.
For item 2, this is the update on implementation of frameworks for May's consent decree compliance.
Good afternoon, Chair, Board of Supervisors. I'm Eric Jones, Deputy County Executive for the Public Safety and Justice Agency, and I'll be providing a brief introduction of this item. Thanks. Thanks. I'll be providing a brief update on this item before we'll also go over to Department of General Services. But in my introduction, I wanted to make sure the board understood this is a update only and with no vote or action required today. As you recall, back in December of 2022, Frameworks 1 and 2 were passed by the Board of Supervisors. Framework 1 is the jail population reduction plan, and Framework 2 is about the capital projects for facilities to come within ADA compliance and the ability to provide for proper treatment for those in custody. Three components of the Mays consent decree primarily exist. The remedial plan, which is a 6-year plan of staffing for both correctional staff as well as adult correctional health, capital projects, and this jail population reduction plan. The first quarterly update is here in person today. Moving forward, there will be filed and received and also publicly posted. And then again, annual updates in person before the Board of Supervisors. But also coming back to you fairly soon will be some budget growth requests that are likely tied to what you'll see in the jail population reduction plan, as well as RFPs or other processes related to the capital projects. You'll soon hear from the Department of General Services about their capital projects update and their process, including public input. Regarding both the capital projects and jail population reduction plans, some say these plans go too far. Some individuals say they don't go far enough. We truly believe it is a balance. It's a balance of the federal decree, legal obligations, providing proper inmate treatment, and our community well-being and public safety. Multiple agencies have been regularly involved in our planning. Social services, the court, public defender's office, conflict criminal defender, probation, district attorney, and numerous law enforcement agencies, such as the Sacramento County Sheriff's Office and Sacramento Police Department. So numerous criminal justice and social services systems partners have been involved, as well as a significant amount of public feedback throughout the process. Our plan is to reduce the jail population over time and to give constitutional and proper treatment for those in custody. After my overview, DGS will provide Framework 2, which you see on the screen here, and then it will come back to me for Framework 1. I'd also like to point out that expert Kevin O'Connell has been included during the entire process. I want to reiterate also that this is not adding jail beds. It's about getting proper care and treatment. In fact, the capital project will reduce actual beds. I will now introduce Jeff Gassaway of the Department of General Services. Thank you.
Thanks. Jeff Gassaway, Director of General Services, Chair Desmond, members of the board. I'm going to go through Framework 2 on the capital projects. The first one is the RCCC control rooms and for barracks C, D, G, and H. The project's estimated to be about $6 million. We put out a request for qualifications in March of 2023 for architectural firms, and we should be getting those results back towards the end of the month, and then we will narrow that list down to 1 or 2 qualified architectural firms and ask for proposals on this project as well as the main jail 3P 300 pod acute psych unit. We will return to the board around August of 2023 with a contract for both projects. And when I get to the next slide, you'll see they're both pretty much in line. We're going to return to the board for approval of plans and specs in January timeframe and to go out to advertise. And then return to the board for the award for construction in June of 2025.
Jeff, Supervisor Cerna, that's a comment or question.
Thank
Yes,
you, Mr. Chair. So with regards to the RCCC capital projects, Jeff, I believe If I'm not mistaken, looking at you, David, I think the board took a recent action, maybe it was as recent as yesterday's consent on, I thought there was a flood control or a flood improvement project associated with RCCC that's been, maybe an RFP has been released. But does that have any bearing, I guess, just in general, regardless of where we are in terms of flood protection out there? But does this particular set of improvements out at RCCC have any need for those flood improvements to be completed first, I guess is my question.
So I think the flood improvement project that we're talking about for RCCC is for the infrastructure and some of the wells that are off to the south of the property to protect that infrastructure when we do have floods out at RCCC. The facilities, I think, if I remember correctly, during the recent floods, we put up a muscle wall around the facility to divert the water, and there was no damage to any of the facilities.
Did that temporary wall encircle the site of where these improvements would take place?
I believe it did protect that part of the facility as well, yes.
So do we have programmed any improvements that would not lead us to have to build those muscle walls, I think you called them, in an emergent situation?
The muscle walls are temporary. In order to do a permanent fix for floods for RCCC, you either need to raise the facility or build a levee around the facility to protect it. And that would take quite a bit of time through environmental and planning. So
I guess my line of questioning is suggesting that I feel a little uncomfortable knowing that we would be investing millions to make some of these improvements that are still going to be equally prone to flood damage. So maybe at some point we could each get individual briefings about maybe the specifics of how we're going to grapple with that, so that we're not surprised the next time there's a atmospheric river or a series of them, more likely, and they're obviously becoming more frequent, more regular. But I do have a little bit of concern about that, hearing what you just shared.
that's understood. I will tell you that, this was the first time the muscle wall was deployed in my time with the county, and it worked quite well. So,
thanks, Jeff.
The other thing that I want to make a statement is these project timelines that I'm talking about today are what we know today. They can and will change as the progress of the projects move forward. The timeframes could be pushed out a little bit, or they could shrink. So I just wanted to make sure that this is what we know today. Main jail 300 pod 3 West conversions estimated to be at $8.4 million. Same timeline as the RCCC control rooms. Request for qualifications was issued in March. Proposals will be towards the end of we'll receive the results of those the end of this month, and we'll issue a request for proposal to the two architectural firms, or the one architectural firms that is qualified. Return to the board in August of 2023 for the contract for those architectural firms, and then back to the board in January of 2025 for plan, specs, and advertising, with the construction to be estimated to be completed in 2027. Oops, wrong way. Intake and health facility. The project's estimated to be about $450 million based on what we knew in December of 2022. Meetings have already started with the criteria architect and county stakeholders, the Sheriff's Department, General Services, Correctional Health, and others. They resumed at the end of March. We should be coming back to the board for approval of a construction management inspection service contract in late August of 2023. Once we get to a point where the criteria architect documents are, I'm going to say 80 to 90%, we'll schedule a public outreach meeting to be able to get some public comment back on the conceptual design and criteria documents. Once the criteria documents are completed, we will look at the cost estimate at that point to update that cost estimate to see what that is at that point, because the cost estimate now is, December of 2022, so and things are changing.
Excuse me, Jeff. Supervisor Strong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I had these same questions that I'm going to ask you. I asked of our airport director yesterday about the $1.3 billion SMF Forward project that we're embarking on. And it has to do with responsibility for cost overruns. What is the construct of this multi-$100 million project? Is it a design build where a contractor will assume responsibility for cost overruns past the contingency? Will there be penalties if projects, parts of the project aren't completed by date certain? I mean, in other words, how much comfort do you or do we have that, as you kind of alluded to, because costs can go up very quickly, that we're seeing in this environment in a short amount of time. So how are we going to protect the county and the taxpayer, given the fact that this is approaching $500 million?
That's a great question, Supervisor Cerna. And we're going to be meeting with the consultant and Colin Bettis to discuss the different types of design build delivery methods. There's design build guaranteed maximum price versus regular design build, and there's a couple other options as well. So we're still exploring those options to make sure that we pick the right ones. We don't have those cost overruns.
Great. Thank you.
In March of 2024, we'll put out an RFQ for a design built entity, hold interviews, and ask for an RFP for those design built entities. Estimated construction start is May of 2026 with the estimated completion date of 2028. With that, I'm done with my presentation.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Supervisor Frost.
Well, this is probably a silly question, but it seems like a couple years ago we were looking at like increases in construction cost by about 15% per year. Are our plans over the next decade planning for that type of an increase annually? Or are we just doing it based on cost today and thinking about it later?
Whenever we look at a project, we try and look at when the project will be completed and add those estimated costs as best as we know in that. And that's why in this project we're building in points where we can reevaluate the project based on the 100% design documents or criteria documents to get a better idea of where we're at and project out what the costs are going to be throughout the project. We're actually going to be meeting with the consultant to look at a project drawdown schedule of the costs throughout the project timeline.
And flexibility built into the design build contract, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Thank you.
May I ask a follow-up? Yes. So Jeff, are we using Bay Area ENR as kind of a guidepost in terms of what we're expecting in terms of both labor and material inflation?
So we contract with Sierra West Estimating when we look at these projects, and he's the best in this area on doing those estimates. We'll also have the construction management firm do an independent estimate as well, and we'll compare the two.
So you're going to, sounds like, keep your thumb on the pulse of all the component costs that go into this on a fairly regular basis?
The best we can, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Supervisor Cerna. I don't see any supervisors in the queue to ask more questions at this point. And I thank you, Jeff. Don't go anywhere.
Okay, so I will, once again, Eric Jones, Deputy County Executive, Public Safety and Justice. I'll move into the jail population reduction plan. I'll provide the overview, and then I also have a variety of departmental experts here, if needed, to provide further input. So I think once the next PowerPoint comes up, we can begin. Okay. So first, I'd like to go through some background, which you all know about, but the Mays Consent Decree was established in 2020 and requires constitutional, adequate care and conditions of confinement in our jails. In May of 2022, just less than a year ago, Kevin O'Connell identified 10 recommendations in the Sacramento County Jail Study, and we follow those recommendations. And they shaped a lot of what you will see here today. September 14th, 2022, the Mays Consent Decree Compliance Workshop occurred here in the board chambers. In October of 2022, the initial jail population reduction plan was publicly posted for additional stakeholders and additional community input. And then on December 7th and 8th of 2022, at a Board of Supervisors meeting, Framework 1 and Framework 2 were approved. You heard about Framework 2. Framework 1 goes to the jail population reduction plan, and of that there were 33 items, 18 existing and 15 new plan items for jail population reduction. And they're reducing populations at various points of the intercept model, which is, in summary, before somebody is booked, so these are alternatives, other options, so we can reduce bookings on the front end. During, so we can reduce lengths of stay within jail where appropriate, and after, so we can reduce recidivism and reduce returns to bookings.
And Eric, I think you need to advance the slides yourself. I don't know, did you intend to go to the next one?
Thank you, Chair.
Oh, no, you were referencing this one, so I just want to make sure we're on the same page with you.
And we committed to quarterly updates. March 31st is the end of this first 2023 quarter. And then you already heard about Framework 2. So also going through a bit of just some of the background before I go to this next slide. Between December 2022 and March 23, we had additional criminal justice partners, stakeholders, and community input took place. Examples from community and other partner input methods were the Criminal Justice Cabinet, the Community Corrections Partnership, Community Corrections Partnership Advisory Board, Public Safety and Justice Advisory Committee, and various working groups were established, which I'll go into later, that do include some Public Safety and Justice Advisory Committee public member representations. Then March and April, the budget process began. So as we're discussing a lot of these items, these 33 plan items, that was definitely a portion of the beginnings of the budget process. Also in March, we determined metrics, which are covered in the quarterly report. We still have much to do around developing metrics. And then here we are in April with our first quarterly report. And as you know, the primary goal of the jail population reduction plan is to reduce the average daily jail population by at least 600 in order to be in or within Mays Consent Decree compliance. And the primary categories of these 33 items of the jail population reduction plan, again based on the O'Connell recommendations, are to prevent upstream the jail bookings, reduce the lengths of stay, and reduce returns to custody.
Excuse me, Eric. Supervisor Frost, you had a question?
Was there a timeline on the jail population reduction, a drop dead timeline?
There is no specific timeline of when we would reach completion. I would just say the Mays consent decree and the subject matter experts and the court will always be monitoring whether we're in compliance. So we plan on reducing this jail population, average daily population of 600 as soon as possible, but not immediately. And each of these components are being tiered in to reduce that population. We've already seen some results of reducing the population. Some of it was as fairly swift as reducing the federal contract so that 200 beds were freed up. And there are other examples that we think we can get there quicker in some areas. But I do want to defer to county council if we gave plaintiff's counsel any specific deadlines.
No, there is not a deadline where we have to have X number released or the ADP down by a certain date. What we have to show is progress. That's what I think the class council and the court expects. And as long as we are making progress and steady progress, I expect that we would stay out of any kind of enforcement action. It's when we don't have that that we run in danger of going back to court.
Okay, Supervisor Kennedy.
Thank you, Chair. Just, I've said this before, but I want to reiterate. It was actually a specific, long discussion that we had during the negotiations, not to be overly prescriptive, so as, to take advantage of the latest information, the latest technology, and essentially with the hope that we can even beat what timeline we may have put forward during the negotiations. So it was purposefully not prescriptive and both sides agreed to that.
Thank you, Supervisor Kennedy.
Thank you. So over the past 5 years, the average daily population in the jails declined about 24%, and the number of persons booked per month, 37%. And even in more recent time frames, progress has been made, but we realize there's much work to still be done. The average daily population identified in O'Connell's Sacramento County Jail study was 3219. Now that is the baseline number that our goal is to reduce the 600 from. That 3219 was relied upon data from 2021. And keep in mind, this is while the jail system was still experiencing significant impacts from the COVID-19 pandemic. As of March 31st, 2023, the average daily population was 2,788. I do want to point out a couple important things here, though. Number one, this is likely lower than normal due to the winter storms and the evacuation of those in custody from RCCC during those floods. That is reflected in our ADP, which when I say ADP, that's average daily population. And then also with the rollout of ATIMS, which stands for Advanced Technology Information Management System. That's the new jail management system. As it's been rolling out, there may be some reflections in slower booking times, maybe fewer bookings, maybe those in custody longer than normal, a variety of things based on the rollout of ATIMS, which is having significant improvements, by the way, as this rollout continues to occur.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Supervisor Kennedy.
Yes, sorry, Eric, but when there's an anomaly like that, like the winter storms and all of that, could we just, in the next report that we do this regular, just make note of that so that we know what part of the 431 reduction was specifically due to that, and what was due to our efforts?
Absolutely, and because we feel these are, if they're anomalies or specific incidents that could throw off our average numbers, we're flagging those two primary things: rollout of jail management in recent times, rollout of the jail management system, as well as when RCCC had to have those in custody removed to other locations for a period of time.
Thank you.
Yes, because we don't want false numbers, so we do need to track that. And that's why these quarterly reports moving forward are very important, so we can see those long-term trend lines and not just what may have happened 1 month or 1 week. And then also, as seen in the reports, in jail bookings over the last 5 years, they've declined from a bit over 3,000 to just over 2,000. Again, those details are in the quarterly reports. And as mentioned, it will take time and more analysis to compare our jail booking quarters moving forward, and tying the population to specific components of the jail reduction plan, meaning what's working, what should continue to be enhanced, maybe perhaps where should we pivot and move to some other strategies. It's very important that we're continuing to look at promising practices, best practices, and evidence-based practices around the country. Regarding the status of the 33 plan items, which is on Table 1, pages 3 through 7, and the work group activities, which are on pages 8 through 10 in the report, 7 items have been fully implemented, but still need ongoing monitoring, measuring, and assessment. And I'll just list real quickly the 7 that are fully implemented. The Crisis Receiving for Behavioral Health Plan, Sacramento County Mental Health Treatment Center, Mental Health Urgent Care Clinic, Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, Federal Contract Reduction Plan, Murphy's Subacute Placement Plan, and the Forensic Full Service Partnership. And I'll go into those in a bit more detail as well in a moment. 25 items have been partially implemented, and there is one item we have here classified as not implemented yet, and this is the commitment to a partnership with the Superior Court for expediting the court process. We are definitely working on this component with the court, but this just shows that this jail population reduction plan is more than just the county, right? It includes our area law enforcement partners, the court. So we are making progress in working with the county on being able to expedite cases and to get their commitment to a lot of these other associated plan items. Numerous work groups needing continual work have been established, like the Integrated Resource Center group and the Risk Assessment group. Those two specifically include public participation from representation from the advisory committee. Regarding the work group activities, which are listed on pages 8 to 10 of the report, items 9 through 11 will be addressed through the Law Enforcement Coordination for Booking Alternatives Working Group. That's really primarily a working group with a lot of social services, behavioral health services, et cetera, and also our law enforcement partners, for example, the Sacramento Police Department and other police departments, really looking at, again, alternatives to booking where they are possible. That's an ongoing working group. Item 12 will be addressed through the Integrated Resource Center working group. Essentially, the Integrated Resource Center, it's really a model, not necessarily a specific physical place, although it could be and should be, or it might be multiple places, but it's really a model of where we are providing a location for either law enforcement personnel to take somebody instead of jail, but also to assist those whether they be drop-ins or they've just come out of incarceration for service linkages. And so we're exploring a number of options here in the county regarding that, and that work is ongoing. Item 14 will be addressed to the Risk and Needs Assessment work group. So a risk assessment is an evaluation to guide decisions making at various points of the criminal justice continuum by approximating a person's likelihood of reoffending and determining what criminogenic needs should be addressed to reduce that likelihood. So we have a working group working on that as well. And there the goal is if an individual we've determined doesn't need to be in jail, where else could that person be? Again, to reduce our population and just for proper criminal justice system-wide reform efforts. Pretrial release expansion items are part of our pretrial working group and diversion and collaborative courts working group. So again, some of these groups have met multiple times, some are just getting started, but again, quarterly updates will be reporting out where these groups are with their progress. So on to measuring success, and as mentioned, the primary objective for outcomes is reducing the average daily jail population by at least 600. And report table 2, pages 11 through 13, include proposed metrics by each plan item. I'd say the metrics very specific, and you see them here, these 4, to the jail population reduction plan regardless of the specific program or project or by specific department or agency, are these 4 areas that we need to start tracking metrics. We've spoken about the average daily jail population, booking total, so these are the amount of law enforcement bookings into the jail. And I would say those 2 are covered in this quarterly report. The next 2, we are still working on developing methodology to be able to report out on these on future quarterlies. And these are the average length of stay of an individual in jail and the number of returns to custody. Metrics were drawn from input from Public Safety and Justice Agency Advisory Committee, Community Corrections Partnership Advisory Board, Community Health and Justice Project Blueprint, also known as On Track. And in fact, there was an exercise by the Public Safety and Justice Advisory Committee specific around metrics. And we know we have a lot more metrics to look at, specifically when we're looking at whether it be collaborative courts, mental health diversion, probation's pretrial, public defender's pretrial. Each might have different measurements, metrics, or outcomes, and we're working still on putting those all together. But our compass are those 4 bullet points you see here on this slide. Additional information we'll be requesting of all of the various departments and agencies involved are costs, program staffing, use of community-based organizations in the work. So that's additional information we're beginning to ask of all of our different systems partners. Justice system data trends are produced by the Criminal Justice Cabinet and published to the county's PSJA, or Public Safety and Justice Agency website. We know we need to do more than just reduce jail population. We are, in fact, addressing racial inequities in the criminal justice system that we know exist. Our reporting systems will be transparent on demographics as we continue to examine methods to reduce these disparities all along the way, from initial law enforcement contact to an arrest to a booking, convictions, etc. These disparities exist across the entire continuum. And we will continue to look at all intercept models in the sequential intercept model. I truly also believe the SIM model is something we should come back to regularly to determine where we can off-ramp somebody from a touch point or contact in the criminal justice system. Next, we'll move on to resource needs and budget impacts. The Public Safety and Justice Agency directed all departments involved in these matters to consider the jail population reduction plan and AB 109 and their growth requests for the upcoming fiscal year. Each department's input was asked to first consider, are these legal obligations? Are these growth requests collaborative efforts with others? Do they consider impacts on the jail population, impacts on reducing recidivism, and whether the strategies are considered evidence-based? Prioritized programs for budget proposals are likely to include these main areas: expansion of pretrial services, increased pretrial release, expansion of felony mental health diversion, and an expansion of collaborative courts. Our studies show that expansions of mental health diversion could reduce over 80 beds, jail beds. Collaborative courts could avoid nearly 80 beds daily. Pretrial services could reduce daily jail population by nearly 150. As well as all of these can reduce recidivism and provide for improvements in treatment. The second quarterly report will incorporate budget decisions impacting the 33 plan items. Finally, I'll move on to the highlights. Just 2 more slides of these are highlights of the quarterly report. There was a jail average daily population reduction of 431. We did discuss that low jail population could be based on the winter storms as well as ATIM's rollout issues. As Supervisor Kennedy mentioned, we will flag and track that. Another highlight is that the mental health urgent care clinic expanded to 24/7 hours in December, and they've had an increase in law enforcement drop-offs since that time. The Mental Health Treatment Center allows for 24/7 law enforcement agency drop-off for what are known as 5150s, or those that are unable to care for themselves. Not a criminal charge, but a safety and well-being. Until recently, this was not an option for our law enforcement partners. And then we began with just 5 available beds, such beds, meaning a place to take such individuals that was not an emergency department or not jail. And then
Eric,
those 5, yes, sir.
Let me stop you there. Supervisor Stern has a comment on that point.
Thank you. I wanted to go back to something you mentioned just a couple of minutes ago, Eric. If I heard you correctly, you mentioned that we're pursuing the possibility of up to 80 individuals who could be diverted and have mental health services provided outside of the jail system. So does that initiative feed into the capacity number for the new capital facilities? In other words, do we assume that we are going to achieve at least that amount, or do we run the risk of building to a higher capacity than we actually need to, based on perhaps and hopefully our own success to divert folks in the first place?
Yes, Supervisor Cernas. So the 600 at least number assumes those numbers that I gave you. Yes.
Thank you.
Sure. So the other highlight I was discussing is the Mental Health Treatment Center, which for 5150 holds, was recently opened. So then law enforcement now had one of those additional options to take somebody other than a jail or an emergency department. And just recently, those 5 beds were bumped up to 25 beds. So that increased capacity will really help our frontline law enforcement. And that is something that the police departments and sheriff's office have really been desiring and asking for.
And can I start there? So are we going to be working to get that information out to the law enforcement agencies so they're aware of this? Because I think we've all heard this. Siobhan, I see.
Absolutely. Dr. Quist and his team are working with law enforcement, and I agree we need to get the word out there so this is better utilized. Yeah,
because I think there's a lot of them are still under the impression that it's not available, or at least it doesn't have that much capacity available, and they're still going to ERs as a default.
Absolutely. It seems like we're about 6 folks a day are utilizing that service, and so we will get the word out there, and we have some strategies that we're planning for around that.
And if I could just add one thing as well. Some folks do need to be medically cleared, and so even if they're going to come into one of those beds, sometimes they need to go to the ER for a medical clearance if they have some obvious serious medical condition.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and thank you, Ann. So to that, we were asking law enforcement to call the center first so they can provide the information to the on-duty clinicians and determine whether it appears an ER clearance might first be needed or not. But this growth to the 25 beds is a very recent development. And so, and to be able to get that information permeated all the way down to the first line responder that's out, working in our communities, is we're putting together a plan of presentations to their roll calls and briefings, giving them pamphlets and information, just to make sure they're aware you have another option than what you traditionally had. Another highlight is our assisted outpatient treatment. Began accepting referrals in February, and so far I understand 13 individuals have been referred to the program. There have been 2 court petitions so far as a result. And referring parties have been a mix of family members, law enforcement, and psychiatric facilities. And some of these numbers might not seem large, but they all matter collectively to be able to get those the treatment that they deserve and to reduce our jail population. I mentioned the federal contract, which was a reduction of 222. And so that was within 1 year of beginning those reduction plans. It is capped for the federal law enforcement agencies to have no more than 100 of the county jail beds for their federal charges. And the Murphy's subacute placement contract was executed for an expansion just recently. 6 are currently in use. Since November, 9 have been transitioned. When I say they, those are what are known as Murphy's conservatees out of custody. So for quite some time, they were in jail and weren't able to be transitioned out. And so this recent program has assisted in that area. And I mentioned the jail management system. This is the Sheriff's Office new jail management system, and one of the key reasons this system is being rolled out is to help in several compliance areas for the Mays consent decree, being able to track much more than the former jail management system. This hasn't been the easiest transition, but the criminal justice partners are continuing to work together to resolve any outstanding issues.
Excuse me, Eric, let me ask you, since we have our behavioral health director here, Ryan, maybe I ask you a question on the Laura's Law. Do we have a sense, based on what we've seen in other similarly sized counties, on what the scope might be? I mean, the number of people we might expect to be helped by this program in this county. Do you have any projections?
I'm making sure I'm going to get my numbers right here. Right now, we designed the program with capacity for 60. So the idea is that over time, the number of folks that end up in treatment, we'll be able to accommodate them. And our ribbon cutting ceremony for the outpatient provider was yesterday. So we're very excited. They've been doing the services since February, but we finally had our open house.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your work. And you know, semi-related to this is, I know we're not one of the first cohort counties for care court, but I anticipate care court will be included as one of these alternative measures to further help in this regard. Is that accurate?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a follow-up?
Yes, Supervisor.
So I know that the board acted a while back to initiate Laura's Law here in Sacramento County. It's obviously taken some time to ramp up and have it established. Do we have any sense of today of the number of conservatorships, or is it way too early to understand what that might mean in terms of a trend?
In terms of conservatorships resulting from Laura's Law?
Supervisor Cerna, is your question, just to clarify, not conservatorships associated with Laura's Law, but just who has been enrolled in assisted
No, conservatorships associated with Laura's Law, specifically.
Got it.
I'm not sure on that one. Sorry.
Well, I think that, if I may, Laura's Law might not necessarily result in a conservatorship. You can
I understand that, but it also may result
yes,
in
that's true.
So that's kind of why.
Sounds like the answer is we don't know yet.
Okay. And I guess that part B of the question is, when do you think we would know?
I'll definitely monitor that, and then as we learn more about that, we'll include that in our updates as the numbers that we just shared here around the 13 referrals. We'll talk about if there's any conservatees in there.
I don't know if the PD, who's in chambers with us, expects to speak later, Eric, but she may perhaps have a better idea of things as well. So,
Yes, I'll call Public Defender's Office up to provide either what you're anticipating, projections around this topic.
Assistant Chief Joe Kress is in charge of that unit.
Okay. Joe Kress, thank you for coming up.
Hey, Joe.
Good afternoon, Joe.
I think it's difficult to calculate that right now because it sounds like what you're asking is AOT creating a pathway other than conservatorship? Is that what you're asking?
Well, there's different pathways. We can agree to that. One pathway is conservatorship. So I'm asking about that particular pathway because to me that's one data set of data that we can at least understand how well Laura's Law is being utilized. But correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm misunderstanding that as a benchmark.
I think that's a possibility. I think it's too early to tell. We've had 3 clients that went to petition to court. 2 of those were granted. 1 of those was not granted, but may eventually be granted down the road. Obviously AOT could be something that the county could, well, that clients could be in that program and it could be an alternative to conservatorship. Honestly, it could be an alternative to misdemeanor charges and an alternative to people going into the jail. It's not necessarily designed that way, but it's probably a better path than arresting somebody for a misdemeanor and funneling them into the criminal justice system. So that may be something that we could eventually look to. Right now, given the petitions that have been, or 2 petitions that have been granted, it's too early to tell whether any of those would lead to a conservatorship or would have led to a conservatorship without AOT.
So if we back up and say, okay, let's not just look at conservatorships, let's look at petitions as a really general metric. It's only a function of what being in place to pursue those options, within the last month or 2, maybe? Is that right?
Month and a half.
Correct,
Okay.
since February.
Okay, so it's that early?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Stern. Good questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kress. And certainly something we will continue to track as we learn more information about this, as we all learn more information. Additional Q1 updates or highlights are the working group has formed for law enforcement coordination to look at booking alternatives, spoke about that, as well as the working group formed to evaluate community needs for an integrated resource center or centers. Again, it may be an expansion of the current JDTRC space. It may be an expansion of the Adult Day Reporting Center space. It may be a new location, and we're working with some community partners to look at some sites for this exact topic. And we're actually going to be doing some site visits soon to other locations because if they work in other places, why can't they work here? We just have to make it a model that works for Sacramento County. The pretrial working group met and will play a critical role in pretrial expansion efforts. I'll just take this opportunity to discuss a new vision for coordinated pretrial in Sacramento County, which would look something like a public safety and justice agency pretrial program with services provided by a variety of agencies. We already know there's probation has one. We already know that the public defender's office has one. They both, we feel, complement one another and or do different things at different points of the continuum of the criminal justice system. Some jurisdictions look at third parties outside of either agency that they can roll out pretrial services. But what we don't want is for them to compete or conflict with one another. We want it to complement the entire criminal justice system, sort of a synergy. And finally, another highlight is that agencies submitted growth requests for FY 23-24 to implement a lot of these jail population reduction plans, which you will ultimately see in the budget process as well. And I'll just say we've been working with a lot of community groups and individuals, a lot of different criminal justice and other systems partners, some being perhaps nudged in a bit outside of their normal comfort zones. But really our guide is this jail population reduction plan, which all of our partners have bought off on. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Eric. Appreciate the presentation and the discussion. I don't see any supervisors in the queue, so I will go to, are there no other presenters? I know everybody else, all the experts are here for questions, follow-up?
Correct.
Okay. So then we'll go to public comment.
Okay, so we have 2 public comments. Nick Bloisey.
Good afternoon. My name is Nick Blois. I represent, I'm chairman of the Carmichael Improvement District, a PBID, representing 1,000 businesses and over 430 property owners. I just wanted to come out today to express our support for the Sacramento County Sheriff, Jim Cooper, and his homeless outreach team, who have recently made efforts to reduce victimization in the unhoused community. We just wanted to thank you for supporting them and funding them, and we wish to you to continue these efforts. because you're not only addressing the much-needed services to the unhoused community, but you're addressing quality of life issues that affect both the unhoused and those who work and reside in the same community. And I just wanted to say on behalf of the entire Carmichael Improvement District Board and staff, we stand with Sheriff Cooper and his homeless outreach team in their mission to improve the lives of the unhoused and address the quality of life issues that affect the wider community. We thank you for your time and consideration, and once again, we express our support for Sheriff Jim Cooper. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Sacco?
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Corrine McIntosh Sacco. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a licensed psychologist in private practice. I serve as chair of this county's mental health board, president of the Sacramento Valley Psychological Association. But today I speak to you as a South Sacramento native, a community mental health advocate, and a mom to a 7-year-old. The presentation you just heard stated that behavioral health interventions will be offered before and during a crisis to prevent jail admissions and further justice system contact. Yet the vacancy rate for unlicensed and licensed mental health counselors in our county is 33% and 42% respectively. These positions are important because they staff many, if not all, of the programs dependent upon for behavioral health crisis response and criminal legal system prevention for those with untreated mental illness. Now, I'm convinced that our behavioral health director and his staff have done everything within their scope to fill these positions, and I don't believe the buck stops with them. Instead of following the research and making the financial investments needed to ensure that we have a functioning behavioral health crisis care continuum of services, this board continues to support the jail as our county's largest mental health provider. This board is willing to ravage our county's current and future financial health by taking out bonds for at least $450 million to build a new jail tower to continue warehousing our county residents with untreated mental illness. $500 million that my and my son's tax dollars will have to pay back in order to gift a sheriff's department that's failed to provide the most basic level of humanity, sanitation, and care to the people inside its jails. And if you think that somehow the sheriff's department's going to change its culture of abuse, neglect, and disdain for folks with mental illness, especially those whose skin color doesn't look like mine, just by having a brand new building, well, you're just delusional. Safety is not the absence of crime, it's the presence of well-being. Please focus on prioritizing budgets that will improve our county residents' well-being by ensuring that they're able to receive treatment in our community. Thank you.
And that concludes your public comments.
Okay, thank you. No public comment on the phone?
No callers. I'm going to close the queue now.
Okay. Well, then I know the supervisors have any questions, so I appreciate staff's work. I appreciate the update. And we will move on to our county exec comments.
I just want to take this opportunity to early wish Flo a happy birthday on Friday.
Happy birthday, Flo.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ann. I don't see any comments from my colleagues. And with that, it is 3:11, and we are adjourned.